Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We had a very lively session. Around 20-25 of the participants were present, and it covered the whole gamut, not only technology but also politics. And I think Jenny has done a wonderful job in summarizing the whole thing, and I leave the floor to her.
Thank you. I'd want to thank everyone who was in the session. They did a fantastic job of thinking about the questions we asked them and putting their minds to the problem. And so this is is that better? So this is a summary of what we talked about. Let's see. So many demands. So this is a summary of what we talked about, and hopefully I captured all the points that were made. And this is just a rough draft. Obviously, we'll probably have to work on making this into a document that's useful. But basically, we identified 4 major needs. So there's solar technology needs, there's biomass technology needs, the need for water and a way to find ways for folks to be able to get access and use water, and then changing the mindset of society so that all of these things become sustainable and can be implemented. So this is kind of separated into some sections. We talked about rural areas, urban areas, and it fell into the solar and biomass. We recognize the need for cheap solar cells, and one of the participants noted the $23 solar cell was needed, like the artificial fruit. And that to implement, there must be a need for it, and we must recognize that need. Lighting is a major need, so solar could provide electric lights. What we need to do is reduce the cost of storage. And also, solar could be used for air conditioning. We could use small photovoltaic units to pump small amounts of water for cooling. We could convert solar to other things. It could be fuels or something else. Water pumping for agriculture could be a use for the solar. So then there's no need to store the solar energy. And then another thing to do would be use pump water as an energy storage. So at nighttime, the water flow back downhill for lighting, potentially. In urban areas, solar could be used for air conditioning. Again, it could be coupled to inexpensive PV panels. This is good because when the sun's out, that's when you need to use the AC. We talked also about possible use of thermionic devices, but these would probably cost a lot more than solar PV initially. And then if we use municipal solid waste in cities, this could help redirect power to rural areas, potentially about 10%. And then there was also a need for refrigeration. Where there's no electric grid, we talked about some things for both rural and urban areas. We could use solar to charge cell phone. There's other alternatives to providing some power, bicycle power, or we could use solar where batteries are used just now, and maybe think about other solar-based devices. In farming in rural areas, find that because there's no grid power, you can't really push development in technology, or that's difficult to do. And one person mentioned that low-cost solar thermal could be a big game changer, but we need integrated systems. And there was a need for heat in coastal areas, and then models to create equity for each village. Some challenges here. Storage device for solar. Well, we mentioned that pumping water could be a potential one of those, but there is real need for a storage device if that's not going to perhaps use all the solar that you get. Distributed systems would require maintenance, and that's a consideration. Costs of solar, I mentioned a $23 solar cell. Someone else suggested we need a 10-fold reduction solar cells and need to utilize every kilowatt produced. We need behavioral change. And then there's this water problem. We need to reduce consumption of water somehow. And then combining various renewable sources. How can we do that? So this brings us to the technology needs that came out of all the discussion. So conversion technologies, so that's solar cells or biomass conversion technologies, improving efficiency. Efficiency is always an important thing. Storage technologies that's not a battery. Demand and supply of biomass are out of sync. And so it would be helpful if we could find ways to solve that. There was some talk of microgrids for 1 or 2 villages, and we could combine various renewable sources. Cheap solar, looking at the materials in the inverter, but also non-modular focus for solar. So focus on the balance of systems where 60% of the cost is. And research opportunities could be in the materials for wiring and racking and that kind of thing. And then there was this need for the ability to be able to use a variety of biomass sources. So different agricultural waste, including municipal solid waste, need to standardize and perhaps make it so that you can do it at the grid level as well. So probably from a small scale to larger scale. So there's probably a need for localized gasifiers for conversion of biomass to biogas and for liquid fuels. And for the smaller modules, there's a cost issue. It's probably the scale factor there. And also there's engines for small-scale biomass, but the design's complicated and efficiency can be low in small scale. So we need major change in technology there for reliability and cost reasons. And then lastly, I think some criteria for successful implementation. Things may need to be small, modular, and locally applicable. And we also need to look more holistically. Any solution needs to integrate with what already exists, and there also needs to be a need there by the consumer. And also, they have to have cash. You need to put the cash in the hands of the consumer rather than think about returning it to the promoter. And then this thing about needing to change our mindset. We need to be sensitive to the needs of the people that we want to adopt these technologies. I think we really need to recognize that they want it and they need it. And then the political will and social support behind it. And so that's what came out. So any comments, any further comments or questions?
Great job, Jenny, and thanks to the whole team. Any comments or questions? Apparently it was a very good job.
Sally?
Oh, one here.
Oh, one question.
So this idea of pumping water, I guess, to a tank on the surface, and then, for example, if you pumped it out of a well, and then presumably you just put it back in the well at night, and if you had the water table was, a couple hundred or 100 meters down, you got quite a, big potential difference. Is anybody already working on really, sort of in well-bore kind of generators that could be used basically, like little micro turbines or something?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't actually know. Does anyone know if that's being worked on?
Yeah, I don't know anything about the wells, but there's a team at Stanford Business School that's working on pumping the water up to an altitude that essentially creates a man-made lake, and then running it down and essentially just having a run-of-river generator spin. So it's a PV plant during the day that pumps water up to this area, and then the water flows down at night.
Okay. Sure. Here. And then here.
Basically, this idea actually came from looking at yesterday's presentations, where there was a presentation by Ms. Sally M. Benson and a few others by Mr. Anil Gupta and Mr. B.C. Jain. And then I talked to a farmer in the night. He says that basically all your ideas which you're giving us essentially means I have to pay some money out. My biggest problem, he said bluntly over the phone yesterday, was 10 years ago, for one big bag of rice, he used to buy 2 bags of urea fertilizer. Today, even for 2 big bags of paddy, he's unable to get barely 1 bag of urea for meeting his needs. So he says that if you can find a way of lowering my cost and things like that, then I would be very happy to adopt some of the ideas which are being discussed in this forum. And of course, I talked to a farmer who in South India where water tables are relatively higher. So basically he said you take the water from these things and you can also actually do pumped up storage. And using that Mizoram composite bamboo turbine, you can sort of release, do run of the mill and generate electricity out of it. That's the basic genesis behind that pumped up storage.
If I can make a comment on the money part, because we heard that also. Having been president of a chemical business in my past life, I always put a lot more value on an extra $1 of revenue rather than $1 of cost savings. And it's the natural thing for people to say lower the cost. But from what I've seen in the villages, I think if we can provide through philanthropy some of the initial things that are needed to increase the ability of the villages to generate profit from their businesses, not just to be subsistence farmers, then that money, just like any other business, gets plowed back into the business and it can grow. So I see groups like the Reliance Foundation and others providing that opportunity to turn this from a subsistence farm into a business which can then self-fund itself. So, yes, here.
I have got some experience in implementing different type of energy projects. In fact, all types of energy projects. And last one being MSW project in Chandigarh, which is supposed to have the best quality MSW. And I spent 110 crores in the project with latest German technology. Eventually, it was a disaster, financially and project-wise. What I see last 40 years of executing all these energy projects, that there are a lot, it is not as simple as it looks. Both the demand, supply, everything is quite complex. And different sets of interests are involved. And in alternative energy, unfortunately, a lot of unqualified but well-meaning people are involved. What we must do, that whatever projects we have already done, maybe thousands of projects, on paper generating thousands of megawatt, we must do a review of the projects already done, their availability, their return, their utilization. We must form a database so that at least from an objective viewpoint, we can review the future. At least we collect all the database for the existing project in India or worldwide, and we see their performance, their return, their utilization. Then we take the next step for the future. Without collecting database, studying it, taking any future step will be futile. This is my 40 years experience, because in 1973, May, my first article on alternative energy was published, and this is 40 years. I know what is happening. Thank you very much.
Excellent comments. I think that's a very good point, which I think we should capture, that if we can get the collective experience over the past 40, 50 years, then we won't be making the same mistakes over and over. Okay, one more comment.
See, I'm just going by the numbers. The requirement of power in a village was, somebody quoted as 500 kilowatt. Now, if you look at household, let's say 75 households with for 300 kilowatt per 300 watts per house, it comes to something like 22, 25 kilowatts. Now, the balance, all of it, if you do an ABC analysis, the balance, the entire thing is being used for pumping water from wells, where the water tables have fallen from 150 to 1,200 feet. Okay? The only way to solve that is by raising the water table. You cannot do anything about it. So the intervention is not by new technologies to make the cost of power cheap, but to build check dams and raise the water table. That's the only way you can do it. So the intervention is not in terms of lowering the cost of power. That's what I want to say.
Okay. All right. Jenny and the team, great job.
Thank you. Thanks.